Good evening, and welcome to the 2022 Swampscott Candidate Forum, co-hosted by the Swampscott Democratic and Republican Town Committees. I'm Dana Swanstrom, Chairman of the Republican Town Committee, and my co-host tonight is Debbie Friedlander, Chair of the Democratic Town Committee. Just a little background on the forum. The first Swampscott Candidate Forum was held in 2019 with the same goals as this year's, to provide a nonpartisan venue for the Swampscott electorate to get to know the candidates, understand their qualifications, and understand their views on important issues facing Swampscott. As I pulled together my opening remarks, I thought of an old quote from a British politician who in the first half of last century said, "Politics is a blood sport." I think I know what you're all thinking. He was thinking about Swampscott politics. I'm just joking, just joking. But just in case he wasn't, he was. I just want to thank the candidates for their courage, their willingness to volunteer, their valuable time to lead the betterment of Swampscott. I'd also like to thank our Housing Authority candidates, Charlie Patzios and Sean Regan, our Select Board candidates, Katie Phelan, Marilyn Fletcher, and Kim Martin Epstein. Swampscott also has an outstanding media arts department who's supporting this event. So thank you to Joe Dulett, who is the media arts department and cable TV coordinator, as well as our high school student volunteers tonight, Benin McCarran and Joshua Harriman. I'd also like to thank the team that pulled this all together. First, the Candidate Question Selection Committee. They're the ones who picked the questions, formed them for the candidates tonight. We had representation from both parties, the Democrat and Republican Party. Mary DiCillo, Steve Iannacone from the Democratic side, Chris Schwartz, who's a Republican committee member, and Bill Gervasio, who's the secretary of the Republican committee. Bill actually is also the timekeeper and did a myriad of other tasks for tonight, so thank you to all of those folks. Our co-moderators, a long list here to thank. Jim Peterson, who's our co-vice chair of the Democratic committee. Nicole Dooley, who's the treasurer of the Republican Town Committee. So thank you to them. Big thank you goes out to the town of Swampscott and the Swampscott schools for hosting this event. Lastly, I'd like to thank my partner and co-host of the Democratic Committee, Deb Friedlander, for both her committee support and collaboration. Both committees love this time of year. We love pulling this event together for all of Swampscott. Isn't it great that we're all here in person, or a lot of us are anyways, and because we see this as an event that builds our community and hopefully unites us as one Swampscott. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Deb Friedlander. Thank you.
Hi, for those of you, he got my name wrong. He pronounced it incorrect. Debbie Friedlander, the chair of the Swampscott Democratic Town Committee. And I want to welcome our candidates and all of our fellow Swampscott friends, neighbors, and family members who are taking time out of their schedule this evening to join us. This is the third election cycle that we've partnered with our friends across the aisle. And I sure wish Washington, D.C. could take a page out of our playbook. There's no name calling, there's no theatrics, there's no moments staged for social media, just neighbors with common interests who've now become, I have to say, friends. The thread we all share is a belief in good governance and to continue making Swampscott the great place to live that it is. Sometimes it really is that simple. So here we are, another election season, when we as citizens have the privilege of voting for those to represent us. It's a time when we've asked to reflect and grade the people that are already in place for the management of the town of Swampscott, the incumbents. And then we evaluate our new candidates vying for a chance to help run the place. Sometimes politics on the national level and even statewide seems remote. But when you live in Swampscott, each and every decision and every policy and initiative enacted at Town Hall has an effect on all of us immediately. There's no question about it. Politics at the local level is intimate. But I believe we can agree all on this. We share a respect for efficient, fair, and transparent town hall tackling the needs and wants of all of the residents of Swampscott. Dana has thanked all of our candidates, and if I may, I really want to extend my gratitude to you because all of you have stepped up to volunteer, to spend your time, your energy, your mind space for what can at times be a thankless job. And I know everyone here and those watching at home really appreciate that you've decided to do that. Before I turn the podium, oh, thank you. Yes, let's clap for them. We are, in fact, very grateful, and all of you are winners just for doing what you're doing. Before I turn the podium over to Nicole Dooley and Jim Peterson, our co-moderators for the evening, I want to wish you all the best of luck. And I, like those of you here and people watching at home, obviously in their comfy pants, are very much looking forward to the evening's substantive exchange of ideas. Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Dana and Debbie, and I won't thank all the same people who have already been thanked. I am Jim Peterson, the co-moderator with Nicole Dooley. Welcome tonight, and we're going to start right in now. We have two candidates for a 3-year term on the Swampscott Housing Authority. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce himself. The moderator will then ask questions. The moderators will then ask questions chosen by the committee that Dana mentioned. So the public submitted questions and the committee narrowed them down because there were many, many questions. We couldn't use them all. During the questioning, there will be no back and forth between the candidates, and we ask the audience to remain silent. After the initial questions, each candidate will have a chance to ask a question of the other one, and then they'll have a chance to do their final remarks. The candidates drew lots to see who goes first. Charlie Patzios drew the first straw. So, Charles A. Patzios of 130 Atlantic Avenue is a candidate for a 3-year term on the Housing Authority. Charlie, please tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, Swampscott. I'm Charlie Patzios, and I'm running for an open seat on the Swampscott Housing Authority Board. But before I begin, I'd like to thank everyone responsible for sponsoring this evening's event. In January, I was selected unanimously to serve as an interim member both of the Housing Authority and the Senior Tenants Association, and I'm honored by them doing so. My family and I have lived in Swampscott for almost 32 years. I'm a longtime town meeting member, and I've served on the Water Sewer Advisory Committee. I will bring perspective to the Swampscott Housing Authority. My many years of experience as a real estate developer, property manager, coupled with my success in navigating various state agencies, make me well suited to advocate for the Housing Authority. I'm running on behalf of the most vulnerable members of our community, our seniors, families in need, and those with disabilities, to work to improve the conditions of public housing. These groups have faced even further challenges in the last 2 years during the COVID pandemic. I care and I want to do the best for the residents of Swampscott by creating, maintaining, and sustaining the very best for the tenants of the Housing Authority. My long-term goal is to increase the availability of low-income housing in Swampscott. My near-term goal is fundamental. It's to work with local, state, and federal partners and capitalize on these relationships on behalf of our community. I believe leading is based on trust, and I've always believed in an open and transparent town government. I want all voices to be heard regarding Swampscott housing issues, the greatest being the absence of new low-income housing with only modest gains in affordable senior housing. I visited the housing authorities, the properties, to met with the tenants and hear their perspectives. And the Senior Tenants Association recently wrote to our local newspapers, and I quote, "The town, Mr. Patzios has nothing but the best interest of the Swampscott housing residents, the town of Swampscott, the Commonwealth of Mass at heart." They appreciate his prior business and philanthropic
Thank you, Charlie.
endeavors, and will place him.
Time's up. Thank you.
Sorry, folks.
Add it to your closing. Sean, your chance to introduce yourself.
Thank you all for being here tonight. It's a testament to the wonderful community that we live in. My name is Sean Regan. I'm 39. I'm a proud husband and father of 3 who snuck in the back up there. And we feel so fortunate to call Swampscott home. My father grew up in public housing. He didn't have an easy childhood, but he did have a safe place to live. Public housing, public education, and public services provided him with the foundation, and he worked hard to ensure that his kids had a life full of opportunity. As I raise my kids here, I feel it's my duty to pay that forward and help improve the quality of life for the residents of Swampscott Public Housing. My professional path has not been traditional. In my teens and early 20s, I made many mistakes. Among them, I attended UMass Amherst on a hockey scholarship, but left prior to completing my degree. When I was 27, I made a decision to change, and in September, I will have 13 years of sobriety, one day at a time. Along with the foundation that public housing provided my family, my sobriety has made the life I have today possible. It allowed me to look for what I could add to the world instead of what I could take from it, and that opened one door that would transform my life. On the condition that I finish my degree, Mayor Tom Menino gave me a job providing constituent services to the neighborhood where I grew up, which includes thousands of public housing residents there. As promised, I finished my degree and decided to keep going. I started law school at night right before my oldest daughter, Annabelle, was born, and I was sworn into the Massachusetts bar shortly after she turned 4. Today, I'm an attorney at the University of Massachusetts. I understand how government works. I know how to advocate on behalf of those who need it most. I believe I'm called to serve and that I will bring much needed new energy and a different perspective to this board. And I look forward to discussing that further tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. First question. How do you plan to involve residents of the Housing Authority properties in the decision-making process regarding potential changes at these residential neighborhoods? Sean.
I believe in robust public outreach and everything that the government does. I know that there is an appointed position or elected position from the Resident Association, but that's not enough. Any impactful changes to the housing must involve the residents and their input as stakeholders. When I think about development of public housing, especially, I see a hierarchy of priorities, and obviously the modernization, maintenance, and improvement of that of the property is on that list. But the highest priority on that list is quality of life for the existing residents. So, if any improvements and developments are to be made, that must be integral to the conversation.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Charlie, how do you plan to involve residents?
So I recently had the opportunity when the weather was nice to be able to walk through the various locations in town. And I saw people outside and I had conversations with them and I listened to what they had to say, what their concerns were. Overwhelmingly, it seems that my observations coincide with what their feelings are, which is the buildings are old. They do their best to try to maintain them, but, you know, let's face it, we've got 50, 60-plus-year-old buildings that have not been modernized, other than maybe changing, you know, light bulbs and locks and things of that nature. I think the right approach is to be able to invite them in and to listen to what their concerns are and to be able to make substantial changes and improvements. I think the modernization of the buildings and the involvement with them in the architectural and planning stage is probably the smartest way to go about that.
Thank you, Charlie.
Do you want to, should we do that?
Sure, if you want.
You
Okay.
can say.
We're actually going to switch it to allow you guys 90 seconds to, because we have enough time. So, Bill, you got that? All right. Our next.
Bill, you catch that? 90 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Our next question is, what experience, if any, do you have in that area of housing and community development? And Charlie, you can go first.
So I've been a developer, and the family's business has been in residential development. So you could say I was raised in housing development and construction and maintenance, property management. The real. Could you do me a favor? Could you repeat that question?
Sure. What experience, if any, do you have in the area of housing and community development?
And so, thank you. We're recently completed a planning stage, and we're in front of the state board of MIPA, which oversees the development of large housing complexes in the state of Massachusetts. We had planned and approved 1,262 housing units of development in the former gear plant in Lynn, Massachusetts. That's one side of the spectrum, and on the other, smaller side, we've redeveloped housing here in Swampscott and Cambridge and Watertown. We have some projects that are in Bedford. So you could say that we've taken it from both redevelopment through completion as well as brand-new ground-up construction, whether it's a large or a small scale. Certainly, the middle of the road would be the Swampscott Housing Authority, where we're looking at the opportunity to possibly redevelop or recondition or remodel our buildings.
Thank you. Sean?
My career with Tom Menino began as his neighborhood service coordinator for South Boston. A large portion of that job's responsibility was facilitating the public process around all real estate development in South Boston. I had 3 meetings a night for the 4 years that I served in that role. So community engagement around housing and development in that respect were integral, and I would say that I have an immense amount of experience there. At UMass, I've engaged in about a dozen public procurement processes for public construction, which is very different and has a lot more requirements under the public bidding law than private real estate development. And I wrote RFPs for those. I engaged in the selection process for all of those. Obviously, the housing's a little different there. Student housing is much different than public housing, but I would say that affordable and luxury development is much more distinct than public housing as well. So I think that as it relates to this role, I'd be able to bring my experience in board governance, public bidding, and overall constituent services and community outreach to bear.
Thank you, Sean. Next question. Please describe your experience in municipal government and affairs. Sean first.
Well, I don't want to repeat myself completely, but a significant portion of my early professional career was in the Mayor Tom Menino's office. He taught me how government can help people. I think Charlie and I were talking a little bit before this about the involvement of government in people's lives. And Tom Menino, they called him the urban mechanic, but for him it was always the little things that made a big difference. And in that regard, I think I learned at the feet of a master in how to deliver necessary public services to those people that need it most, especially our most vulnerable elderly and public housing residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Charlie, your experience in municipal government and affairs.
So many, many years ago, back in 1976, just before I graduated high school, I was chosen to involve myself in something called political discovery. And I was in the mayor's office of Boston for 1 semester. At that time, it was Kevin White. And I got to see government do it wrong. I got government to see how busing worked or didn't work. And it was very, very, it was telling. I didn't want to go down that road when I was involved with government. So what I wound up doing was I involved myself here at town meeting in Swampscott, involving myself also with a water and sewer advisory committee here. I'm sorry, folks, but the rights went up. I'm involved with the Department of Environmental Protection and the EPA on the federal side. We work with all types of properties that have contamination issues, and we clean them up. I've dealt with every board and committee that there was that involved the type of permitting that can be complex when you're dealing with the state level of projects, and I've gotten to make a lot of friends along the way. I probably have the best time telling the truth. You don't have to remember. It's a lot of work to spin a yarn, and I find it most gratifying that my reputation in the halls of government is fairly well intact and not without any blemishes. So I appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you, Charlie.
To do it here.
Our next question. Are you familiar with open meeting laws, and how would you address the backlog of minutes that have not been publicly posted for the Housing Authority? And that will start with you, Charlie.
So I'm running for the Housing Authority, and that's for the term that's coming up. What I can tell you as far as what hasn't been done is sad, if that's what the case is. I'm unfamiliar with the fact that minutes are missing. But recently, because of COVID, lots of things and rules have changed and challenges have occurred, and we've made plenty of opportunity for people to have some flexibility in what they do. In every aspect. So I would think that the Housing Authority could be given some grace time in order to gather and correct those affairs. I don't think that anybody is trying to hide anything. I certainly hope they're not. And I mean, I think we can all do better. I think that's why both of us are here tonight. We're trying to improve on things, and you're pointing out an area that needs improvement. I don't see a reason why it can't be done. I just can't tell you why it hasn't.
Thank you. Sean, are you familiar with open meeting laws, and how would you address the backlog of minutes that have not been publicly posted for the Housing Authority?
I'm very familiar with open meeting laws and public record law requirements. It's integral to my role in the General Counsel's office at UMass today. In 2021, there was 18 public noticed meetings for the Swampscott Housing Authority. There is one meeting minutes posted that corresponds with those meetings. Public boards are subject to laws that govern their existence, and those are foundational to their success. On day one, I would sit down with the executive director and roll up my sleeves and get those done. That's something I know how to do. That is where this board needs support most, on the operations of the board. Before we can get to any development, before we can get to any outreach and involvement of the stakeholders, being the residents, we need to ensure that this board is operating in compliance with the law. That's necessary. To go further, if we think we're gonna undergo a major development project with public procurement, very, very specific laws if we think we're going to comply with the public procurement laws when we can't even post meetings, and I'm not disparaging anyone, COVID-19 took a toll on the board, and I completely agree with that, but we need to get our house in order before we can develop or do anything to help the residents.
Thank you, Sean. If an opportunity arose to respond to a funding proposal from state government, federal government, or private funding regarding public housing in Swampscott, how would you respond to those proposals as a member of the Housing Authority Board? And Sean.
Again, I would roll my sleeves up and help the executive director to respond to any funding that may be available for the improvements of public housing. As I mentioned earlier, I've written RFPs, RFIs, and RFQs for public projects on the public side, so I know what it takes to respond to public requests and grant information. And I would definitely explore any option were money to be available for the Swampscott public housing. But again, I don't think we're in a position to do that. I really don't. I think that the most urgent need of this board is the support of its operations. And until we can get that operating in a functional way, I'm not sure that we have the capacity to acquire any funds or take on any projects in compliance with the law. And that's of great concern. It really is a great concern, and the residents of Swampscott should be concerned with that as well.
Thank you, Sean. Charlie, how would you respond if an opportunity arose to respond to a funding proposal from state government, federal government, or private funding regarding public housing in Swampscott? How would you respond as a member of the Housing Authority Board?
Thank you. Look, we all have different talents, and the board's made up of unique individuals. Some have strengths in understanding where the funding lies and what we have to do to get it. I believe that we can do both simultaneously, clean house, get our affairs in order, and also pursue grant funding opportunities, whether it's local, state, or federal government. I believe that understanding fundamentally what those procedures are, even if we don't participate immediately out of the box on a project, doesn't mean that we can't, some might say, take a dry run at it. But I believe that we can do that. We can also seek the help. I've had a conversation with Lynn Housing Director Charlie Gator, and I said I'm pursuing this position, and I said, if I'm successful in that, I said, would you help us understand how to navigate and how to fix those things? And I got an overwhelming yes. So we have the support of the City of Lynn and the director and asking questions and informing us how things are get done, because the successes of the City of Lynn are an example to Swampscott. We're right next door to each other. There isn't a reason why we can't ask for help and guidance in figuring those things out. And look, we might not possess the greatest record when it comes to providing minute meetings, but I got to tell you that the spirit, I believe, of the board is genuine, and everyone there wants to help. So aside from some minutes being short, I believe that we can overcome that pronto and immediately get to work on what the needs at hand are.
Thank you. What is your position on the Elm Place development? Charlie?
So there's a distinction between affordable housing and low-income housing. And just because you have affordable housing, if you're on the low-income side, you can't even afford affordable housing. So when we're looking at area median incomes of $70,000, $80,000, and $90,000, and you look at the percentage, in some instances I've spoken with people in the Housing Authority, and you know, when you're getting by on $1,000 or $1,200 of Social Security or other types of disability income, where some of the residents are financially, you can't afford affordable. You can't afford $1,800 a month or $1,600 a month when you're only taking in $1,000 or $1,200. You have to feed yourself, you have to clothe yourself, you need your transportation, and you know, look, you want to go to a birthday party, you don't want to bring just best wishes. Sometimes it's all you can afford. And I think the Swampscott Housing Authority has a place for low-income housing, and I distinguish the difference between affordable housing and low-income housing, and I believe they're worlds apart.
Thank you. Sean, what is your position on the Elm Place development?
So there is a huge distinction between affordable and low-income public housing. The Elm Place, as I understand it, is a 40B project. Generally, I am opposed to most 40B projects. I think it was a well-intentioned statute when it was first implemented. Affordable housing, along with public housing, is much needed. Obviously, there's housing scarcity across the country at every market level. And I think we need to undergo some process regionally, locally, statewide, and nationally to increase the housing stock. But the 40B statute in particular, I believe, has become a vehicle for developers to circumvent the public processes that are in place to make sure community engagement takes place. And it's become a way for them to get more density and make more money while claiming it as an affordable project. Again, I think the 40B statute is flawed, and most projects that present themselves as affordable under the statute are really just profit centers for greedy developers. And I would say that I'm against the Elm Place project, and that at the state level, 40B really needs to be looked at and amended. But I would also just go back to the meeting minutes thing. If we can't get the very basic foundation of public body governance, it's not a little ding. It's a big ding. It's compliance with the law. And if we can't get that process done, we're open for legal risk in the future.
Thank you, Sean. Time's up. But maybe this will fit with what you were about to say. What are your top priorities if elected? Sean?
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, this is government, right? In order for government to be effective, in order for government to be good, we have to get the basics right. And we can talk about modernization, improvements, and all that. But my first priority would be to sit down with the executive director, Ches, and iron out where she needs support. And obviously, I beat the drum on the board governance issue, and that's central. I mean, there's no integrity in any process that can't be documented. Charlie mentioned his appointment in December. You know, I submitted my information, and I was contacted by a board member and told there would be a process. The next day, he was appointed in the newspaper. I would love to see the minutes from that meeting. I would love to see what that process looks like. So if we're talking about larger projects that require very detailed and intense process, public process under the open bidding law, it's scary. It's scary to think what could happen, especially when we're talking about tapping our own personal contacts to benefit the housing authority. If we don't have meeting minutes, if we don't have an RFP process that's documented, and we're reaching out to friends for help, that's a scary proposal. So day one, I would ensure that we are in compliance with the law so we can take on the bigger things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Charlie, what are your top priorities?
Thank you. My top priorities are addressing the deficiencies that we have. We have a waiting list that is a mile long of families that need our help in providing housing that they qualify for that isn't available for them. And so when I take a look at this, and I understand that the right thing to do is to create the low-income housing, the housing that the Swampscott Housing Authority has a responsibility to fulfill. There's another agency in the town, the Swampscott Affordable Housing Trust. They concentrate on that affordable aspect of it in whatever terms apply for that. But my first priorities, and they've pretty much have been spelled out here. The first thing is a housekeeping thing, which is to get the minutes taken care of. The second thing, and the biggest thing to me, is to find out where those revenue streams are so that we can start to take care of our properties. You know, there isn't a time that goes by when we've heard that the school needs a roof or that we need a sidewalk repaired. We haven't heard once that the other deficiencies that exist, and I saw them firsthand, and I've experienced them. I've walked through apartments and I've looked at them. And so the folks know who I am. They know that I care. That's because I've been there. And I genuinely want to take those steps immediately in looking at being able to replace housing.
Thank you. Now, each of the candidates will have a chance to ask one another a question. We'll start with Sean, your question for Charlie.
Charlie, as it relates to the board and your service on it, what deficiencies, if any, do you have, or what weaknesses do you have in board governance of a public body, and how would you rely on your partners in the board to accommodate for those?
I think a lot of people know my weaknesses. I'm rather direct. I don't take a runaround question. I don't like half answers, and I certainly don't like things that mislead the public, and I think everyone knows that sometimes my microphone gets muted during town meeting because I can be a persistent son of a gun. I think my weakness is sometimes I wear my heart on my sleeve, and that I take what I do with sincerity, and I have compassion, and sometimes there isn't room for that. As far as going and asking people, it's about relationships. It's about being able to build candor and trust, to be able to go to someone they know when your yes is a yes and your no is a no, and to be able to trust you, that you care and that you've told them the whole truth. There's no embarrassment. I think the reason the politicians give a political answer is because they want to be able to be safe and not to be entrapped by a half a truth. I'm not very good at lying. I'm very good at telling the truth. What I know is that we need to do better, and we can do better. I also strongly believe that even though we've got these issues that have been between various boards in the town, that we have room to heal those divisions, that we have the opportunity to make a difference, and that to impact people's lives that are the most vulnerable people in our community. And I know that we can do that, and together we can put our differences aside and we can work together. And I believe that I have a good man next to me, and I believe that I'm a good man, and we can work together. Either one would make a great candidate.
Thank you. And now, Charlie, you can ask a question of Sean.
Sean, you know what? The question that you asked me was a really thoughtful question. So I might just say, answer your own question.
I think where Charlie is strong, you know, I think I'm weak, and I think that probably goes for both of us. I think in the long time history, institutional knowledge of Swampscott and the interrelationship between the various boards and commission. Charlie's filled me in on a lot. We've talked a few times through this process, and I definitely got a crash course in that. So I think that's where my deficiencies would be, and I would rely on the long-term members of the board to help me navigate those areas. I think, again, Charlie, talked about his strengths in working together, and I think I share that view. I think it's important for us to work together for the betterment of all Swampscott's residents, and in particular, in this case, those of the public housing program. I think my strengths, obviously, is the issues that I've identified here tonight as where the board needs most urgent need. And so I think, two good, well-intentioned people here that want to do the right thing. But I think the board's needs at this time, their urgent needs at this time, requires someone who's going to get in there and support the executive director and the board in doing the daily operations of the board. And then we can get to those bigger issues that we're aligned on. We are aligned on many of the larger issues, and that's not different between us. The distinction is the ability to right the ship tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you both for a good, respectful discussion and good, direct answers to the questions. And we're running well on time, so we're going to give you 2 minutes to close instead of the 90 seconds you were promised. And Sean, it's your turn to wrap up.
I first want to thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank the Republican and Democratic town committees. It's a thankless job doing that stuff, as it is, running for public office. I think many times we get more crap, right, than praise heaped upon us. And I think it's anyone to put their name on the ballot is brave, and you have to commend them for that. When I moved to Swampscott, my wife and I fell in love with the town. We're so fortunate to be raising our kids here. So fortunate for an engaged citizenry, and as was pointed out in the opening remarks, that it's nonpartisan and people are coming together to make sure for a housing authority position. If you look back over the history of local housing authorities, there's a lot of corruption. Back in 2013, Deval Patrick wanted to disband them. And that was because these races aren't paid attention to generally. But you have two fine candidates here who want to do the right thing. And I commend Charlie for putting his name in running for this. And, I think, Charlie's lived here for a long time, and he knows the history. He has history with many of you. I haven't lived here for 30 years, but I do plan on living here for the next 30. And I do feel that at the local level, the state level, and the national level, it's time for the next generation of leaders to step forward and take up the torch. And so I think, if I could humbly ask for your vote, and with that in mind, I would do that here. So please, thank you all, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Sean. Charlie, your turn to wrap up, and I cut you off a little in the opening, but we're giving you a little extra time now, so whatever you didn't get to finish, then you can add in now.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Democratic and Republican town committees for putting together this meeting. I also want to thank the camera crew and everyone that's broadcasting, and over the years that I've been here, it's the same people. It's always Joe back there, and he's doing an awesome job, and I want to thank and recognize you. I was selected unanimously as an interim member and as the Housing Authority, the Senior Tenants Association, and I'm humbled by that support. But it wasn't given to me just because I was a nice guy. And I've spent time and I've asked questions and I've visited them, and I understand where they're coming from. I think that can go a long way. I also bring a perspective to the Housing Authority with my years of experience in real estate, both as a developer and a property manager. And I can look at this and I can take this and advocate for ourselves, not just locally and on the state level. And I don't need this, actually. What we've got in Swampscott is some healing to do. We've had an opportunity to poke at each other and to do everything that is entertaining sometimes and divisive at others. And it's not healthy for us. What we need to do as a community is to coalesce and to care about each other. And I think Sean might be wrong one thing. He said it's a thankless job. I get tremendous satisfaction out of doing something like this. And I've done it quietly, without any fanfare, and the feeling that I get inside is more fulfilling than the best transaction in real estate that I've ever had, because I help my fellow human beings, and I know I can do that here in Swampscott at the Housing Authority. I ask, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlie and Sean. We'll be back in about 10 minutes for the select board. Welcome, everyone. We have 3 candidates for 2 3-year terms on the Select Board. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce herself. The moderators will then ask questions submitted by the public and chosen by our 6-person committee. The candidates will answer questions in random order, which will change for each question. There will be no back and forth between the candidates, and we ask that the audience remain silent. After the initial questions, each candidate will have a chance to ask the question of the other 2, and they will present with final remarks. The candidates drew lots to determine who will go first. So first we have Katie Phelan. She'll be on the ballot as Catherine Phelan of 19 Banks Terrace, candidate for the 3-year term on the Select Board. Katie, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you to both the Swampscott Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town Committee, Mary Ellen, Kim, and all who are participating and putting on the forum. I think I speak for all of us when I say it's both energizing and exciting to be here and to take questions from the community so that the community may get to know us all a little bit better, both on a civic level and a personal level. Personally, I, like the Select Board, wear many hats. I'm a mom to 2 future Swampscott grads. I'm a wife to a 2001 Swampscott grad and a current Lynn Public School teacher. I'm in-house counsel for a Fortune 500 company. I'm the PTO fundraising chair at Hadley, and I'm a lover of both the outdoors and reality television. During COVID, my postage stamp lot felt even smaller than it actually was with 2 very energetic toddlers. And my husband and I turned to Swampscott's open spaces to help in that spot. Every day I was grateful to hop in the car with my then 2-year-old and take a coastal drive ending at Fisherman's, listening to Frozen 2 and praying she would fall asleep. So many hours were spent in that car at Fisherman's Beach, enjoying the view with Stella snoring in the back seat and me working on whatever contract or agreement that I had to mark up for work. And many a Sunday morning were spent at Harold King Forest searching for the rusty old car. If you know, you know. My son Jack is obsessed with it. And anything we could do to escape the COVID stats, the stress of navigating the pandemic, anywhere we could go outside, we went. In those spaces, we met so many folks and their 4-legged friends doing exactly the same thing we were, which was trying to find reprieve and connect. It's a shame it took a pandemic to open my eyes, but here I sit before you, looking to give open space and other community priorities the time and energy, and in some instances money, that they truly deserve, to help unite the town and work together to the common goal of bringing community back to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Next, we have Mary Ellen Fletcher of 35 Puritan Road, candidate for a 3-year term on the Select Board.
Thank you to the Democratic and the Republican committees, and thank you to Jim, Nicole, and Junior, who we'll be waiting on. Thank you to Katie and Kimberly, Laura, Lauren Epstein, in case her mother's watching. So I am Mary Ellen Fletcher. My name is first on the ballot there, and I will be ready to start work on day 1. I've been living in town. I've had the privilege of living in this community for just short of 35 years. I've raised a child here. I'm a long-time town meeting member. I've served on numerous committees, such as the Harbor and Waterfront Committee, the Regionalization Committee, which we called Article 6, Recreation Commission, and currently I'm the Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, along with being a liaison to the Capital Improvements Committee. I've coached softball in town, middle school field hockey, and I've been a Girl Scout leader. I should also add that I brought back the rabies clinic, which will be coming up in a couple months. I've studied business at the University of Arizona, where I also played Division I field hockey. I'd like to add I am also a member of the 1988 United States Olympic team. My business background ranges from running small to mid-sized companies. Been a partner in business for I've been a partner in a business with 147 employees. Currently, I'm in a family business. In my wildest dreams, I never thought I'd be sitting here vying for a position on the Select Board. I'm not a political person. I'm incredibly private, but I decided to step up and offer my help. I'm very serious. I take these issues very serious. We need physical discipline, affordable housing. We need better transparency. We need to find out what's happening with our staff issues. I have a reputation of being a hard worker.
Thank you,
someone-
Mary Ann.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll leave that for the end.
Thank you. Next, we have Kimberly Martin Epstein, who goes by Kim, of 22 Berkshire Street, candidate for a 3-year term on the Select Board.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you to the Swampscott Democratic and Republican Town Committees. Of course, thank you to Katie and Mary Ellen. Like Charlie and Sean both said, this has been a very, very congenial race. We're really excited to be able to present people to the town who have nothing but the town's best interest, and so lucky you. Completely lucky you. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself first, quickly, because I think these bullet points are important too. I've been living in Swampscott with my family since 2008. We are raising our children who are here. My family's here tonight. Thank you. And I'm an attorney. I am the managing partner of a firm, and I have a lot of experience doing transactions that involve things that people in towns really, really care about, and working with people who care about them. I'm really, really pleased. I'm really pleased that we've been able to do this forum, and especially live in person again. I think it's important for the people in town to have the benefit of learning about the candidates. This is a very critical way to protect open and fair elections, and I don't know that we'll all agree on the entire universe of things we talk about tonight, but I know that we all agree that it's really worth protecting the way that we elect people. I chose to run for the Select Board this year because I feel strongly that my skills and temperament will be an asset to this town body, and this is a body that has faced some very critical and controversial things. And I think I bring a lot of perspectives in my professional life to the board. Politics are personal and they're very, very local. And we learned over the last 2 years that everything we do affects the people that we actually know. My work on the Anchor Food Pantry was a perfect example of how we really came together to serve very, very, very vulnerable people in town. So I want to finish up later.
More time.
I want to finish up later.
Thank you, Kim. All right, our first question. What role or responsibility does the Select Board have in managing committees and boards of the town? First up is Katie.
So I think when we talk about the Select Board, I think I think about them as a board of directors, right? And the town administrator is the representative who answers to I'm sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. The board of directors, that's right. So I think what we have to keep in mind is that from us stems all the boards and committees below us, and that we wear many hats and they wear maybe just one hat or a few less hats. And their specific mindset is the topic that they have at hand. And then they report back to us for us to think about it on more of a broader level. So that's how I would describe that.
Thank you. Kim, what role or responsibility does the Select Board have in managing the committees and boards of the town?
So the committees and boards in town that don't have roles that have to be elected, so the ones that have appointed members, which is many. There are, in many of those cases, there is a process by which people have to be, the posts are, open posts on those boards are publicized openly, and then people would apply potentially, and then the existing members of those boards might be able to vet those potential candidates. But in many cases, the Select Board actually will approve, and ratify the choice of some of these committees. So I think it's important that the Select Board understand what the roles of those committees are, how important it is to, flesh out really good candidates for those appointments, and then help those existing boards find the right people to fill roles. And, it's a combination of what is on the agenda for that particular board, which is to promote something very specific for the town, and the Select Board's role in helping them keep their agenda, moving forward.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, what role or responsibility does the Select Board have in managing the committees and boards of our town?
Well, the Select Board doesn't have the role of managing all of the different committees. Some of the committees, you have the planning board, so the planning board has their own role. You have finance committee, capital improvement committees, those are a totally different role. But the advisory committees that the select board has, their role would be to really state the mission of what they're looking for in the boards. What would be very helpful is if the select board actually appointed people to the committees. First, appoint the people, and then appoint a variety of people. Have fair and open applications, and if you have equal applications, just have a lottery. Don't be afraid of different points of view. Don't try to control the committees. Just get information out there, let them tackle it, and let's see where the cards lie. I mean, it's really pretty simple. So,
Thank you, Mary Ellen.
you're welcome, Jim.
Next question. Please describe your thoughts on the development of Swampscott's recreational rail trail. Mary Ellen first.
On the development, was it?
That's the question.
Swampscott's recreational rail trail. I don't know the level of development. What I know about where we are, well, first, the rail trail was voted on. I think that's still a little confusing for many people. The rail trail was passed approximately 4 or 5 years ago. The rail trail has been under development when there's enough money from fundraising, from grants, and from private donations. The rail trail is committed to not having any money from the actual budget. So my understanding is, because I'm not on the rail trail, that there's a small section that's already built out, and they're waiting to deal with lawsuits from National Grid and see where we're at. So that's what I know about the rail trail.
Thank you. Kim, your thoughts on development of the rail trail?
Sure. First, I'm going to recap because I think Mary Ellen's right. The 2017 warrant article resulted in a successful town meeting vote to move forward with the rail trail to provide funding for the design, engineering, and the acquisition of the easement rights. So that was voted on in 2007. Prior to becoming a town meeting warrant, it was unanimously sponsored by the Select Board and supported by the Finance Committee, Capital Improvement Committee, the School Committee, the Planning Board, the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee, and the Conservation Commission. So the 2017 general election ratified this decision. And so the town, through the various bodies and town meeting, made it clear that the town supported the rail trail and the benefits that it'll bring the town. Recreation and open space, true. Also, traffic abatement, connections between neighborhoods and neighbors, equitable access to town facilities, and, access to things like our schools and our parks. So this development needs to go forward. The town wants it.
Thank you. Katie, your thoughts?
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Your thoughts on development of Swampscott's recreational rail trail?
So I think all the other candidates pointed out that the rail trail has been voted on and passed by the town, and it is something that the town has supported and is truly looking for to develop in town, a connection between all communities, all across Swampscott. Right now, as Mary Ellen stated, there is a portion of the rail trail completed, which is lovely if you haven't been on it. And I know we frequent it often. And it's important to continue the development to connect the other neighborhoods because, as Kim stated, these connections are really going to be what bonds the community, like where the new school is being built. The rail trail will help facilitate walking to the new school. It will help facilitate being able to connect the communities that right now are not as interwoven and feeling as connected as maybe they should.
Thank you. Our next question. How do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our town? And we'll start with you, Katie.
So I have been thinking about this a lot because nobody likes to be the last to know anything. And I've talked to a lot of folks and knocked on a lot of doors recently, and the common thread that I hear is they feel like they're the last to know. And I think sometimes that's a product of ourselves, holding a mirror up and saying, am I being as civically engaged as I could be? And sometimes the answer is absolutely yes, and sometimes it's not. So there could be room for improvement there. But the true thing that I wish to facilitate is a community bulletin board that is not based in social media. I would really like to see conversation that occurs from boards and committees to town in a factual, informational way, a safe place where you can go and find things out that does not have commentary or is not in a lens. And I think that is the number one way that I see using technology, but pulling back that sort of social media piece to really integrate communicating back to our community.
Thank you. Kim, how do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our town?
I would echo what Katie said, that, it is important for people to ask themselves, how can I be involved? But that's not enough, of course. We have some really excellent examples of initiatives in town where the engagement was at its best. And I think, a good example would be the Yes campaign pushing through what was a very, very, very arduous and difficult campaign. And whether or not you agreed with the result, nobody could disagree with the fact that there were people out there talking to people. There were people at the farmers market. There were people at committee levels. There were just people out talking to actual people. And there were arguments, and there were placards, but there was actual reaching out. And so I think, I would advocate for any committee, any part of the town that has something that they need people to know and be engaged in, to take a page and get out there and actually off the social media and talk to the residents, because people will be incredibly excited to talk with you.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, how do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our town?
Well, there's a number of ways I'd like to involve residents. Number one, there are many residents who want to get involved, and they're not put on committees. There are many times where you watch a selectmen's meeting, and there's opportunity to hear the entire story and to really know what all the facts are around a certain topic. I think that selectmen should also have time for business hours. It's been a long time since we've had selectmen actually have business hours, and if I have the opportunity to be on the board, I plan on having business hours so people can come and talk. So, it's a really good question, and people need to take the initiative to get involved, but the select board needs to make sure residents feel that their opinion matters. And that's something I've heard over and over, that they just don't feel like their opinion matters and they're not being listened to.
Thank you. Next question. What strategies should the select board use to address the current and future inflationary pressures on the budget? Kim.
Thanks. How does it's a budget. It's a budget. Everybody has to manage the inflationary pressures on their budget. Unless you happen to be one of the very top, wealthiest people in this country, you're hit with it. So there's no analysis that the select board or the finance committee or any other body has to do that is different than what we're doing every day. What's the most important, and what's going to have the biggest impact, and how do we prioritize? And that's very, very hard. But there are some things that we can do to, alleviate pressures, and that'll actually pave the way for additional relief. So I think we'll take a look at, the price that people, I think Charlie mentioned earlier, issues with the actual pricing of services. When you're paying too much for your muffler, you go to a different garage. So you find out, we have an obligation to press the town to find out if we're paying the right amount for our services, and to place value on the top priorities and work with the various committees to find out how to make priorities at the worst times possible.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, what strategies should the select board use to address current and future inflationary pressures?
So right now, the 2023 budget is out, and it's in its final reviews with the Finance Committee. Capital Improvements advanced their requests just the other night. So our budget right now has I think has a good amount of, I don't want to use the word cushion, but there is thought in that process of where it's going to really affect us. The one area that usually hits us a little bit harder is when our insurance bill comes in, and so we already have our projections on what insurance is going to cost as far as the health. So I think we're good for our budget this year. One thing that might hit us a little bit harder is on the on utilities, but we have very, very substantial stabilization funds, and I think once the economy kind of pans out, we're going to be okay. We are in a great position financially, but we've got to keep our finger on it, and that's critical. Time's up.
Katie, what strategies should the select board use to address current and future inflationary pressures?
Well, I think the best thing we could possibly do is when we are starting to feel those pressures, that we are looking at the budget with the departments that it's affecting most, the most. So getting to have those close conversations with those departments, finding out how we can possibly make cuts or pull back some things. I mean, everybody at the time, everybody feels that collectively, right? I know I feel it when I go to the grocery store or when I budget my household. It's the same sort of idea when you have to think about, okay, I have this much need and this much budget. And then you have to go back and say, well, how much of that is a need and how much of it is a want? And you have to really take a hard look at that and pull back and say, okay, wants, needs, budget, they have to jive, or else you're not going to be able to balance the budget.
Thank you. How do you plan to balance the specific needs for environmental protection and desires for commercial and recreational development of the Swampscott Harbor? We'll start with Katie.
So I really think the harbor is Swampscott's next school. And by that I mean that we've really delayed on a lot of things, and we are really putting ourselves in a position where we cannot delay anymore. Mother Nature is not waiting on us, and the environmental impact is happening, whether we're ready to make a decision on what the harbor looks like or not. And I think we no longer have the luxury of time. There has to be hard decisions made about the direction that we as a community would like the harbor to go in, and whether those directions run parallel with conservancy and resiliency. And prioritizing coastal climate science and data-led discussions while still letting the vision of what our town character was, is, and should be. It's going to be a delicate dance, but we have to do that. It's just like a lot of us are reckoning like what kind of cars we're driving, what type of things we're consuming. We, as a collective community, we have to push our community to do that, to reduce our environmental impact.
Thank you. Mary Ellen?
Can you just read it again?
Yep. How do you plan to balance the specific needs for environmental protection and desires for commercial and recreational development of the Swampscott Harbor?
So right now we have a harbor plan. However, I think we need to have a little bit more in-depth, or a whole lot more in-depth harbor plan that involves environmental people, environmental specialists, the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, the fishermen, and the entire community. Regulatory rules are regulatory rules, and we have a very serious, not issue, but we are very lucky to have enormous amount of eelgrass. But it's a double-edged sword because the eelgrass prevents us from doing a number of things. I think our biggest issue right now is the coastline and our seawalls. We need to start to address that a little bit harder than we're doing right now. We're doing a good amount, but we need to focus on it a little bit more, or a lot more.
Thank you. Kim, do you need me to say the question?
No, I don't know the question. I think what's going to end up happening is that we're going to realize very, very quickly that what we're going to do with the harbor is protect our town from the next big storm. I think we're going to have to put our efforts to focusing on conserving and taking care of the beaches, the erosion, the seawall, and what that will do is it'll necessarily require us to think about our commercial development, not on the sea. and which is fine, because if we can't protect our coastline, nobody's going to be able to spend any time or money downtown. So I think we have an opportunity to attend to some very, very serious climate resiliency measures that we need to take. And I think what's going to happen is that's going to have the effect of not being able to necessarily develop right on the waterfront, and it'll require us to think carefully about how we do our commercial development in town so that we can, continue to enjoy our downtown. I think that's what's going to end up the reality after the science.
Thank you. Next question. Given Swampscott's requirements from the state for more affordable housing, how should the town handle the increase of concentration of residents in certain areas, such as near the commuter rail station? Kim?
Thank you. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that I'm really excited to answer a question about affordable housing. So this is...
and it was random that you got
And it
the
was
question?
random that I get to do it first. So people have heard me say this before. Swampscott is a community of opportunity. And the idea that we would be afraid of or worry about people coming into our town to live here, to take advantage of the amazing town that we have, people who have their sights on a higher quality of life. We're not afraid of that. We should not be afraid of that. We should be welcoming and open. And if that means that we have areas of town that are more amenable to denser buildings, so that more people can live, in affordable housing, smaller units, then I think we should be welcoming and supportive of that. Not every part of every community is going to be perfect for dense, affordable housing, but we need to really concentrate on how to make it high quality and financeable so that it's here when people want to move here and live in it.
Thank you. Katie? Want me to repeat the question?
No, but thank you. So I think, as Kim said, affordable housing is necessary. 40B is happening whether we are opening the doors to 40B projects or not. They're coming here. There is a requirement for us to build here. The vast majority of houses in Swampscott are single-family homes, and there's extremely low to no inventory in homes in general at any level, affordable or not affordable. And so for me, when I think about affordable housing, I think about approximately 1/4 of Swampscott's households that are currently low income, and a good portion of those are seniors. And even if we closed the doors and did not open them to any further people to come into Swampscott to build our community, we would not have enough housing to sustain our seniors who need affordable housing. So outside of what Kim's saying, even if we just thought about it in a tunnel vision, we don't have the correct type of housing to facilitate the people that we already have in our community.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, should I repeat the question?
No, I got this one. So affordable housing is the can that's been kicked down the road way, way too long. And it has to be, now we're pressed up against it with the developers trying to come in and use 40B. An example of 40B is the Elm Street project. Now, that is a good idea, but in the wrong spot, in my opinion. It's a very dense section of our community, and it's going to put, I think, a pretty serious hardship on the people that drive through there, which is me and many others. We have an opportunity with the new legislation that's come in, the 3A, and I think we have a great shot at putting a zone in over at Vinnon Square and redeveloping that entire area. I think that'd be a great idea. I think it would look beautiful. You could have mixed housing, mixed use. And we also have the Glover over at the Glover restaurant. That's set up for a 40R. So we just have to be really active and start getting this going. It's a shame we're this low.
Thank you. And again, we're doing well on time, so we're going to up you guys to 90 seconds to answer.
To do it on that
Here on
question.
out. Okay. Currently, almost 20% of Swampscott's residents are 65 and older, with that population projected to increase to 35% by 2030, according to a report compiled by Swampscott for all ages. What do you think are the 3 most important issues for our town's aging population? And we're going to start with Mary Ellen.
The three most important issues, God, there's so many issues, but the most important issue that I heard from seniors that I've spoken to is taxes, keeping our taxes in control. I had a Friday when I went out, and I ended up talking to two seniors in their 90s. One, I don't believe it. I should say her name, but I better not. I really wanted to see her. She told me she's 94. There's no way she was even 84. And there are several others that I had the chance to talk to, and they feel that they're worried about being on a fixed income. They're worried about the services that they're getting. They're worried about not being part of the community. They started, all four of them talked about how they felt left out. So that kind of shook me that day. The other thing that I find, which is really incredible, and the reason I think this is important, is I moved my father up here for the last 5 years of his life, and I learned quite a bit about living with the senior and what their needs are. Nutrition and food is a really big thing. We just passed $100,000 for a new kitchen for the senior center, so I think if we can get like volunteer chefs in to come and have food and make it a big environment, I think we're going to go a long way. And we could also secure getting nutritious meals to people who aren't out there.
Thank you. Kim, do you want me to repeat the question?
3 priorities for seniors.
Yes.
I think something that's really exciting about Swampscott is that we have this opportunity to converge an aging population, an entrenched senior population with an up-and-coming young population. So I think that every issue that could face and be challenging for seniors can be essentially mitigated by a mixed community, the mixed community that we're in. I think the single most concern that I've heard in my professional life as well is housing for seniors. Either we're talking about an actual affordable housing crisis for seniors, or a situation where seniors are living in, essentially are overhoused in their own homes, and there's no way that they can really relocate to more affordable or more appropriate housing, places to age in place. So in combination with our attention to affordable housing, figuring out how to have seniors in appropriate housing, either using the accessory unit bylaw or creating new affordable senior housing, that is the way that every community that I've worked in has been able to manage and really improve the housing situation for seniors. So I think community engagement is obviously very important. As I said, it will be really wonderful to come. I like the idea of the senior center kitchen, but I think engaging seniors with the youth, there are many programs that really benefit both generations, and I think that will help a lot with the disengagement that seniors may feel in the community that they've been in for so long.
Thank you. Katie?
So I already brought up that seniors are facing the burden of potentially paying 30% or more of their typically fixed income on household cost, and it really will be an issue for seniors in our town if we have no lower income housing options and they cannot afford to stay in place or age in place. And then they have to leave the community that they've lived in for some decades sometimes. And then that only fosters that feeling of loneliness that Mary Ellen was talking about, because they have to go somewhere else. They have to leave their routine. And I don't want to see our seniors face that. I think that housing is the number one thing. I think number two, it's those other fixed income worries, such as taxes and services that the town provides. If we were to lose those services that the community would then have to provide for themselves, that they may not be able to. And then the third thing, I think, is the community feeling that we're all discussing up here. Some of the best memories I have as a Girl Scout are going to our local senior center when I was young and sort of pairing up and learning so much from so many wonderful seniors in my community back home that really changed my perspective on a lot of things. What I understand now is that it's probably happened vice versa, and I didn't realize it was happening at the same time, which is that maybe some of my younger outlook was rubbing off on them too, and that's fantastic, and that should continue to happen.
Thank you. Next question. What role should the Select Board play in supporting the Recreation Department in providing programming and activities for children and adults? Katie?
Well, I think that we should be providing the most that we possibly can under the charter to providing support to our recreation department. And that's not just because I have two very energetic children who have taken advantage of a lot of rec opportunities, but also because they provide an invaluable service to our community. They foster community pride. They create a sense of unity in town. And whether you're playing on the field, watching on the field, you'll see every age group at some of these events. You'll see all the way from toddlers to seniors enjoying things that Danielle and her team have put together, have provided for us, and I would just love to see more, and the way we can get more is by supporting it more.
Thank you. Mary Ellen?
Can you read it again?
Sure. What role should the Select Board play in supporting the Recreation Department in providing programming for children and adults?
So I think what the Select Board should do is, well, if I were on the Select Board, what I'd start doing is thinking outside the box. We've got great resources locally. We have the YMCA and the JCC, and I would start to leverage programs that they could provide and also collaborate with Marblehead. We also have very, very strong PTOs, and I think we can have additional programs throughout all of those different bodies. The other thing is we have 3 buses at the senior center that I think we could incorporate into the recreation program and start. I'd really like to see a bus running on Sundays to get kids and seniors over to the farmers market. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done. It just has to take a little bit of time. Think outside the box. Doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and it's easy to do.
Kim?
Yeah, I think the recreation department or the recreation programming is sort of the quietly under the radar, opportunity for the town to engage the most diverse amount of people. Everything falls under it, between sports and the farmers market or, outdoor movies. I mean, there's almost anything that you can do to enjoy yourself and to engage with others could fall or does fall under the recreation department. So there's no reason why the Select Board could not spearhead additional leveraging, but with the idea that prioritizing that will actually engage citizens and actually solve a bunch of other questions that we've been talking about, which could be, engagement issues and being the last to know. If you're getting people together and it's doing things that they like to do, because there's so many different things to do, you're going to get people together. And so the Select Board should definitely prioritize strengthening the recreation department by allowing them to have, additional resources, ideas, maybe increase the amount of, I don't know how many people are actually appointed to the recreation department, but if there needs to be more people actually working on these initiatives, then I think that an expansion of that committee would be perfectly appropriate, and I think it would actually go a long way in making sure that what the vision of the department is actually put into place.
Thank you. What are your top priorities if elected to the Select Board? Mary Ellen?
My top priorities are to address what's happening at Town Hall with our staff. That would be my top priority. Well, not my very top. My very top actually would to keep our thumb on our fiscal responsibilities in town. So that's always a given for me. My next priority would be to really identify what's happening with employee retention. And after that, I would like to address transparency. I have knocked on probably 200 doors in the last 3 weeks, and every person comes out and addresses transparency, transparency, and transparency. And I think what we have to do is we have to have the conversation. We can't just roll out a program without having a conversation about it. I mean, the number one complaint I get is the little garbage can program where nobody had an opportunity to talk about it. So this is a good idea, and I think it would have come down a little bit easier if we spent some time having some conversations about it. There would have been a lot more buy-in. So those would be my top 3 priorities. And after that, development, affordable housing, all the top stuff is really important. But those would be my top 3 quickies.
Thank you. Katie, what are your top priorities if elected to the select board?
Well, I've made it pretty well known that my top priority is open space, and that's because that's where my community here in Swampscott has thrived. So my goals for open space are no net loss of open space, enhancing our existing open spaces, and finding a way to increase our overall open space. And the way that I would like to facilitate that is creating an open space enterprise fund. And even if we ask town meeting to appropriate 1% of free cash annually into that fund, it would be a pool for which we could start to develop the funding to potentially acquire more open space should it come available. I think that we could additionally use the money to develop underutilized open space that we already possess without having to pull that money from another budgetary source. So open space is my number 1 goal. I think also, as I've already said, communication is a really big goal of mine, and I have mentioned it once before, and I'll mention it again. Nobody likes to be the last to know, and as Mary Ellen said, many folks felt like they were the last to know on certain topics that rolled in during COVID and otherwise. And part of that is that we do not have a central place, I feel like, where I could go as a constituent to find out what is happening across the town. And I think developing that would be helpful.
Thank you. Kim?
Yeah. Well, I can't not say that my priority would be to figure out what's eating everyone. It's clear, I too have spoken to people, and they want to understand what's going on at town hall, and they want to understand, I want to understand why they feel that there's no transparency. So I would say my first priority would be to find out what I don't know, because I don't understand why this is everyone's main issue, and so it feels like upon becoming a member of the select board, if I were to, I would have an opportunity to really dig in and figure out, why is everybody so upset? I understand that there were a lot of small decisions that felt they were not made in an open forum, and yet this feels very current and very recent. So I really want to understand why now. Why are we especially upset now? I think it's really, really important that we understand this and feel like we can trust our town governance. We have to be able to trust the town governance, and I don't know what I don't know. So that's a very, very important priority to me. Housing is an incredibly high priority, and I will tell you, after just speaking tonight, my main priority is to help people understand what affordable housing means. I don't have enough time tonight to give my usual discussion, but it's really clear to me that we don't understand why we're in the situation that we're in and how to get out of it. And I believe that I do, and I'd really, really like the opportunity to help the town understand that a little bit better, because it's going to be very, very important that we do.
Thank you. Now the candidates have a chance to ask one another a question. And just need to get the order here. Kim, your question for the other candidate.
They're going to kill me. We joked about these easy questions we were going to do. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do my crazy hard question. I'm sorry. But it'll be... All right, this is a hypothetical. You're a member of the select board, and there's an uptick in vigorous and obviously controversial protests in town. Forget about whether you align personally with the protesters or not. This is not a First Amendment question, and this is not a law enforcement question.
Okay.
This is about, how do you assure the town, how do you assure the police, how do you assure the target of the protest as the governing body of the town, either that there's something that we're going to be able to do, or that, I'm sorry, there's nothing we're going to be able to do. This is a question about being a leader and about assuring various parties in town.
Katie, your answer to Kim's question.
So I think as a leader, when you're faced with really tough situations like that, you do have to take a step back and flesh out personal views from what is going on. And I think in the hypothetical you said it's not
It's not First Amendment, and it's not about law enforcement.
but those individuals still have to feel, the community has to feel supported, the police have to feel supported, and the protesters have to feel supported, right? Because that's our job as select board, is to make a community where those conversations are okay. We have to be comfortable in being uncomfortable sometimes. And it's okay to put ourselves in that place as long as we're doing that in a safe way. And I think that what's important to understand is we're not always going to get along. We're not always going to have the same viewpoints. But if we create a safe space to have those viewpoints come across, then we will all be richer for it, because we will be hopefully not only speaking to one another, but listening to one another. And that's really important.
Mary Ellen, your answer to Kim's question.
So first, I would have a question as to whether or not we're able to have a dedicated place for protesting. I did happen to talk to a lawyer last week, and they told me that there was a mechanism that we could actually put a place, I don't know if that's true, but we could have a designated place for protesting. I spent many, many, many years, I think 9 years, training in Europe during the winter, and I was in Russia, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia, and I know what it's like to have no rights. So I'm going to be really honest. When I see a protest, I think it's awesome. And I might not like what someone's saying, I might not like what they're doing, but the fact that we can do it, and we have that freedom, this is about our First Amendment. So I think if we can have it in a safe environment, I really think we should just all be appreciative that we have that right.
Thank you. Katie, your question for the other two candidates.
Okay. So one thing that's become apparent to me during this campaign, and as we sat here tonight, is how important transparency is to the voters of Swampscott. And during this short time, a couple of groups have asked us here on the panel to take positions on certain issues, on certain topics. Mary Ellen, in at least one case, you did not respond to actual questions, instead choosing to debate whether the questions were relevant, and then welcoming that the groups submit the questions to this forum if they wanted an answer. So here I am on sort of behalf to, you've invited it, so here it is. I think the voters deserve a clear yes or no answer to the questions from all of us, so here's our chance again. The first question is, did you vote in support of the new elementary school in October 2021 townwide referendum, and do you support the full implementation of the rail trail as currently proposed? And Kim, it's my understanding that you did answer the questions, but obviously, please share your answers to me.
Which one of us goes first?
I'm sorry. Katie.
I already answered.
I'm sorry, yes. Let's go on. Kim, Katie, Mary Ellen.
Okay, so the first part of that question from your yes committee was,
Well, it's not my yes committee.
it's not your yes committee?
No, it's not.
Okay. But just tell me what because you wanted to know.
Did you vote in support of the new elementary school at the October 2021 townwide referendum?
So I voted on the finance committee to move the question to the town for a vote. I also voted to make sure that we had the correct funding. When I went and did my own personal vote, I did not vote for the large school. I didn't feel, it's my personal opinion, that that school was way too big for that community. But I will tell you something that's really important. Recently, one of my biggest, proudest moments on the finance committee was I pushed very hard to get that funding approved right now. The town's position was to fund the school, bond the school money this July and August. I pushed aggressively to make sure we bonded it, got the treasurer to bring it to bond. We got in at 2.83. It's now, the rates are now well over 3. I spoke to a bond agent last night who said that our actions on the Finance Committee has saved the town millions and millions, between $10 to $20 million, and that's only in the first month. So I might not have checked the box, but I did, I have done all the right work. I will say that I don't appreciate taking shots at me through social media and yes or no questions. It's not yes or no, and you don't want someone sitting on the board that's going to be yes or no.
Thank you. And so I want to clarify here, the rules were 45 seconds to ask the question, and I believe, Katie, you used your 45 seconds, so this is the question. So the same question to Kim.
Okay. I'm going to use part of my answer to say I agree, and I don't appreciate having pot shots taken at me on social media either. And so on behalf of anybody who's had pot shots taken at them on social media, turn it down. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. And yeah, these issues get people really riled up, like the new school. And I will say that I did vote yes in the general election, but I voted no the first time around. And I have had candid conversations with the committees, with the Yes campaign actually, during that period of time, and really appreciated getting a better idea of what the real plan was. So by the time I voted yes, I really understood not only where we were, that we had picked out a spot that was really vetted well, but I felt like everyone had done their homework. So I felt comfortable with my vote. But I felt like we were in a situation where we might not have had choices that we felt were the best for everybody because we had kicked the can down the road on schools, much like we've kicked the can down the road on other things. So to me, this was another example of something that could have been dealt with to maybe more popular or, to other people's satisfaction if it had been dealt with earlier. It's the same problem with housing. It's the same problem with the pier. When things aren't dealt with in a timely fashion, when the can is kicked, you end up with choices that you may not love.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, your question for the other two candidates.
So my question is, if you're on the board over the last 5 years, so if I were on the board over the last 5 years, I would have made sure there was more transparency and a culture of inclusivity. So if you were on the board over the last 5 years, what would you have done?
Katie.
So I think when we're discussing transparency, I think it's really important to give the term a little bit of context for how we're using it. To me, transparency in local government is the way that information is flowing back and forth between the select boards, the committees, the individuals that make up the boards, and the constituents. And that flow of information, it's never held back. There's never a little bit that's just held back, right? So the most important aspect of transparency outside of communication is collaborating. And I feel like we could have been doing more collaboration. And collaboration, it's just to advance the interests of the town with accurate and full information. And when we are all informed at all levels, it allows transparency to occur naturally through those avenues of collaboration, because nothing's being held back and we're all communicating with each other. I mean, transparency is also tangled in credibility. And once transparency is lost, credibility is lost. And that might be where we are hearing people are feeling we are. Yeah. And all these ideas are so closely interwoven that they have to be constantly and vigilantly thought about when you're on select board. Because once you lose any of those, collaboration, communication, credibility, it's really difficult to get it back.
And Kim, your response to Mary Ellen's question.
Yep. First, I just want to say that I absolutely respect and intend to fully uphold all open meeting laws and all the legal requirements of municipal decision-making. I don't think anybody's questioning whether a candidate for a select board would think that or not think that. But I don't think that's actually the debate. I think one thread of the debate that I heard was this feeling that somehow pieces of decisions, whether you ended up agreeing with the end result, whether the end decision was a good one for the town, that some piece of it was being made outside of the public eye, so that there was a requirement that it be in the public eye, and yet somehow that didn't happen. And that was making people very, very upset. And then the question became, well, did the ends justify the means? And whenever I hear, do the ends justify the means, and anybody pauses for a minute, I get really worried, because there are so many examples of when somebody says, the ends justify the means, that go very, very, very poorly. And just the idea that somebody in our government could have thought that was true is why we're here today talking about transparency on a board that is governed by open meeting, instead of talking about things like why we got here. Why we have, why we had to build a new school, or why we have not enough affordable housing. So we're going to address transparency here, and I'm going to say that in a public body, the ends do not justify the means. The public needs to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. There are open meetings, there are special meetings, there are meetings upon meetings, there are committees, and there's no reason for there to be a problem.
Thank you.
There's no reason for there to be a question.
Thank you, Kim. All right, now you're all going to have a chance to give closing statements, and we're going to give you 2 minutes. I know we had originally said 90 seconds, but we're doing well on time. So I'm going to, first going to be Katie.
Okay. So I think that things I've learned since deciding that fateful day that my husband took a photograph from the paper at his mother's house and said, "You said you wanted to become civically engaged. Here are your open seats. How do you want to handle it? What do you want to do?" is that this position, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for the thin-skinned. And from Election Day, Select Board is charged with the task of making policies that serve this thickly settled 3 square miles that we all call Swampscott. And although I'm not part of I'm now part of a family that has lived in Swampscott for many generations, I and many others like me, we were not born and raised here. And what I like to say about that is, I'm here now. So I wasn't born and raised here, but I'm here now. And I love this town fiercely. Dozens of people have come before me with similar experience and background looking to join Select Board. And the experience that I have has given me insight into my character and helped me develop the passions that drive me to work hard. And to that end, I just quickly want to thank my family, especially my husband, for always supporting my passions, no matter what size. I don't know, I'm getting emotional, sorry. We talked about civic engagement like so much during COVID till we were blue in the face, probably more than COVID itself. And when he took that picture at his mother's house and sent it to me, it made me feel like he was encouraging me to do this because he knows that it matters to me and that I have something to offer you all. And really at the end of the day, if you have a great family and a great town pushing great things worth pursuing, what more could you ask for? Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ellen?
Well, first I'd like to say thank you again to everyone who's put this on, especially Joe Dulett, Joshua Harriman, and Benin McCarran. You've done a great job. Thank you to Katie and Kimberly. From knocking on doors, I've heard over and over that people really want transparency and they want people that they can trust. It's hard for citizens to be informed if they don't have the actual facts. As hard as it is to believe in your leaders, you need to really know exactly what's going on. A great example I pointed out before was the garbage, our new garbage can policy. Again, a great idea, just it could have been done a little bit differently. I promise to ask the hard questions and give accurate and honest answers. I'm committed to following open meeting laws, the same as what Kim has said. This is critical to our government. Most importantly, I'm committed to bringing all of Swampscott into the conversation. I have a reputation of being a hard worker, someone who listens, someone who pays attention to detail, and someone who's not afraid to respectfully say what's on their mind. That's why I'm not a politician. I'm also someone who doesn't say yes or no to complicated questions. I'm running for the board because I would be a great asset with my experience and the courage to ask the hard questions and ensure that citizens are listened to. I'm running because we need to do the hard work and to get some good change to improve our town. My resume speaks for itself. 11 years of attending Finance Committee meetings has given me the real bird's eye view of what's going on in our community. I'm the most qualified person for this position. I would appreciate your vote on April 26th. I'd like to say thank you for everyone for coming out.
Thank you. Kim?
Thanks. Yeah, when I decided to run, I had to make sure it was going to be okay, but I think my family too understood that this was something that was going to be very much a part of who I was at some point, and so I thank you very much for supporting me for doing it now when everything is as heated as it is. Thank you very much to the Swampscott Democratic and Republican Town Committees again for doing this. I can't stress enough how incredibly honored I am to hear the power and urgency of the questions that you've allowed the citizens of the town to bring forth today. It's really, really, it is humbling to hear the urgency with which people want to know about us. And so I would say openly that if there's more to discuss and people want to reach out and talk more, I'm here to talk as much as you need. I really mean that. There's no position that I've stated tonight or that I've stated prior to tonight or that I've backed up with other votes as a town meeting member or in the positions I've set forth on the Affordable Housing Trust that I don't align with something that I would advocate for on behalf of this town. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about management of development, commercial development, waterfront development, housing development. It doesn't matter whether we're talking to attending the needs of very vulnerable members of our community, seniors and people of low income. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about protecting, our natural resources and the environment. My views are open for inspection, and I welcome the inquiry. Not everyone's going to have the same views or the path, on the path or the outcome that on some of the issues that we've discussed here, but I'm confident that there's no resident of this town that believes in inaction. We make the best decisions when we listen to one another, and when you elect someone that can listen and act on your behalf, then you've elected me. And I really hope to have your vote on April 26th. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Mary Ellen, Kim, and Katie for participating. You guys did a great job. And on a personal note, it's awesome to see 3 women up here because there's not enough of us running. So thank you.
Thank you.
The election will be Tuesday, April 26th, and all voters will vote here at the high school. You may also vote over the counter or in person at the town clerk's office until noon on Monday, April 25th. If you are unable to vote on Election Day because of physical disabilities, religious beliefs, or travel, you can also vote by absentee ballot. A link for the absentee ballot application is on the town website. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a good night. Oh, did you not call? Did I miss something? Did I miss something?
No.
Oh, I thought I missed someone.
No, I think you should repeat the early voting thing.
Sure.
People have been asking, and we didn't.
You scared me.
We were told you couldn't do early voting.
Yeah.
So, I did. So let me clarify.
Hold on.
Excuse me, everyone.
Charlie.
Sorry, let me clarify. It is not early voting, but if you do go, you can do an absentee over the counter. I did that today because I'm due on Election Day. So you can go vote in person. It is not called early voting, so I apologize for that.
No,
I mean,
you have to say you're not.